In Parashat Vayechi, Jacob dies. His family travels back to Canaan, a funeral procession of both Hebrews and Egyptians, to lay the great patriarch to rest in the burial place that Jacob acquired for himself decades earlier. And then we read, Vayashav Yosef mi Mitzrayma hu ve'echav v'chol ha'olim ito. Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers, and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. The Olim, the ones who went up to the promised land, they descend right back to Egypt. And it makes sense that Joseph would return to Egypt. He is a top official in the Egyptian court, but his brothers lived most of their lives in Canaan. They and their families only came to Egypt under the duress of a famine that is now long over. They have lived under Joseph's protection, but never trusted his long-term intentions. After burying Jacob, they entreat Joseph to have mercy on them, fearing that with Jacob's death, Joseph will finally take revenge for the sins they committed long ago. So here is a question. Why do Joseph's brothers return to Egypt? Our traditional sages don't offer an explanation, so I think the answer must be the obvious one. They returned to Egypt because Egypt was a better place to live. Canaan might be the promised land, but Egypt was the great empire with military might, political stability, and agricultural bounty supported by the Nile. And Egypt welcomed this immigrant family from the north. Egypt is the paradigmatic foreign empire in the Hebrew Bible. From Canaan to Egypt, Egypt to Canaan, the push and pull of Egypt looms large in Torah. The Torah uses two words in roughly equal numbers when recalling Israel's history in Egypt. Gerim hayinu, we were strangers in the land of Egypt. Avadim hayinu, we were slaves in the land of Egypt. Ger and Eved, stranger and slave. Joseph's family first experienced Egypt as Gerim, strangers, when a deadly famine stretched over the whole world. Rather than shuttering its borders and hoarding rations for its own people, Egypt sold the grain its people had saved during years of plenty to peoples of neighboring lands. Jacob's family fled starvation in Canaan and found rescue in Egypt, where Pharaoh invited them to settle permanently. The Torah does not use the word ger, stranger, to mean a reviled outsider. Rather, a ger is anyone going to a new place or a new way of being, someone who is vulnerable. The ger has the potential, but is not destined to be oppressed. The ger can be a welcomed minority. And that is what happened in Egypt. Gerim hayinu, we were strangers in Egypt. Egypt saw our vulnerability and welcomed us with compassion. But then, Avadim hayinu, we were slaves in the land of Egypt. And the Torah leaps from the end of Genesis with Joseph's death to the start of Exodus with the emergence of a new king who oppresses the Israelites. But 430 years have passed. 430 years. That's longer than the Aztec Empire, the Russian Empire, the Roman Empire. That's 72% longer than the United States has been around, 450% longer than the modern state of Israel has been in existence. The Torah shoots through these centuries in the blink of an eye, so we don't know how or when the Israelites came to be enslaved. We don't know when ordinary Egyptians started resenting them, viewing them not as a welcomed minority contributing to society, but as intruders, impositions, threats to Egyptian prosperity and way of life. Avadim Hayinu. Israel's time in Egypt ended very, very badly. Still, the Torah rejects a one-dimensional portrait of Egypt as archetype of evil. In Deuteronomy, we will read, "You shall not hate an Egyptian, for you were a stranger in his land." Rashi explains this verse by saying, "Although Egyptians cast your male babies into the river, you should not hate them, because they were your hosts in your time of need." Even when we consider Egypt, that paradigm of foreign empire, the Torah does not let us wallow long in our memory of oppression. The Torah insists on complexity in all relationships. Egypt welcomed us and oppressed us. Gerim, Avadim. Egypt is both site of Israel's salvation and site of Israel's enslavement. In 1928, the great scholar Salo Baron, father of Jewish history as an academic discipline, famously proclaimed that it is time to break with the lachrymose theory of pre-revolutionary woe. That is, the prevailing Jewish belief that Jews of the Western world lived in anti-Semitic wretchedness until modernity. Baron advocated for a more nuanced understanding of history. While Jews did not have equal rights, nobody except nobles and Christian clergy had rights at all in pre-modern Europe. When comparing the living conditions of Jews and Christian peasants, who made up the great majority of the population, he argued that Jews came out ahead. And since Baron, other scholars have turned their attention to long stretches of Jewish flourishing, with Jews often coexisting with neighbors of different religions and ethnicities. 600 years of the Second Temple period, over a millennium of flourishing Jewish life and scholarship in Mesopotamia, where the Talmud came into being, the golden age of Jews in Muslim Spain, though joined the Stryker Center this spring for a lecture series on the complexities of Jewish life in the Iberian Peninsula. Yet, these periods have been punctured and ended by violence. Crusades and pogroms, senseless acts of hatred, terrorism, and the ultimate expression of Jew hatred, the systemic murder of millions of Jews in the Shoah. I think Jewish history bears witness to the truth that the Torah repeatedly reminds us. We have been both Gerim and Avadim, both welcomed and persecuted by foreign might. And I think the Torah uses these two terms in order that we not develop either a sense of perpetual oppression nor a fantasy that other nations will always take care of us. The Torah presses us toward nuance and complexity. It pushes us to resist national narratives that are simple but wrong. May the Jewish people of today resist such simple narratives too. May we sustain genuine friendships across diversity and cherish the richness of civilizations we have co-created with other peoples. And may we also develop our own strength as a Jewish people, a strength rooted in integrity and sincerity. May we find that God walks alongside of us in our complicated history and fractured present, and into a future that will surely be complicated but beautiful too. Ken Yehi Ratzon.